Hello. Thank you for visiting the Other Woman and Man Stories channel. Don't forget to subscribe. And here we go. John and Melissa got married 22 years ago in the small church of their hometown. The first years of their marriage were filled with tenderness, passion, and dreams of a shared future. They indulged in lovemaking at night and could not get enough of each other. During the day, they walked hand in hand through the picturesque streets of the town, kissing at every step. After a couple of years, their daughter Emily was born, and all their time and energy went into raising her. However, over time, the relationship began to lose its former fervor and turned into a familiar family routine. John got a job as a long-haul truck driver so he could periodically leave home on week-long trips across the country. He enjoyed coming back to his wife after a long separation, feeling her warmth and care. They both got a break from each other, and the time they spent together felt like a honeymoon each time. This arrangement suited them both. Melissa opened her own small but cozy and popular beauty salon, gradually gaining a reputation among local fashionistas and beauties. Their daughter Emily grew up and left to get a prestigious degree in interior design at a university in a neighboring state. John and Melissa were proud of her determination and diligence. However, during John's last visit home, Melissa found that her husband's presence caused irritation and tension. She began to be annoyed by absolutely everything about him. The way he drank coffee in the mornings, his habit of watching the evening news, his snoring at night. She looked forward to the end of his vacation, dreaming of finally being alone. 2 days later, John was about to go on a long haul across several states. Without much regret, Melissa saw her husband off, waving goodbye to him. Inside, she was glad that she had been left alone in their cozy house on the outskirts for a whole 3 weeks. The joy of living alone for herself consumed her more and more with each passing day. The first week, Melissa devoted entirely to herself. She slept late in the huge bed, read books by nightlight, did manicures, had lunch alone at her favorite restaurants. She definitely enjoyed the lack of everyday responsibilities and the ability to live only for her own pleasure. However, by the middle of John's trip, she began to feel some boredom and longing in anticipation of his return. On one of the first warm April days, Melissa decided to take a walk around the town square near the house, but a freezing, piercing wind suddenly picked up outside. Chilled, she ducked into a cozy cafe on the corner to warm up with a fragrant cappuccino. The waiter approached her after a couple of seconds, greeted her warmly, and handed Melissa the menu. She recognized this young, tall, and handsome man. He was the son of her old friend. His name was Aaron. Melissa remembered him since childhood, when he was a mischievous boy. Now, before her stood a real handsome man. They talked with pleasure for some time, remembering common friends and acquaintances. Later, she placed an order and continued to admire Aaron, who served customers professionally and gallantly. Melissa couldn't help but admire his broad shoulders, confident movements, and charming smile. She was especially struck by the way he looked at her, attentively and with unconcealed admiration. She felt like the most beautiful and desirable woman, even though she was no longer a young girl. Leaving the cafe, she couldn't get him out of her head for a long time. That night, for the first time in many years, she had a tantalizing erotic dream featuring Aaron. The next day, Melissa found it hard to concentrate at work in the salon because of persistent thoughts and fantasies about the young man. She caught herself constantly checking his Facebook page and looking through his photos. One day, John accidentally caught his wife browsing Aaron's Instagram. "What are you doing?" her husband wondered. Melissa panicked and turned off her phone, refusing to show what exactly she was looking at. Her husband insisted that she show him what she was just looking at. Melissa resisted, and they ended up arguing. Her husband became suspicious and jealous, leading to frequent quarrels. He always felt that his wife was hiding something. Even on the last trip, John left without saying goodbye properly to his wife. A few days after John left, Aaron wrote to Melissa on Facebook. He confessed that since that meeting he couldn't stop thinking about her and wanted to see her again. She thought that if they were both thinking about each other, then it was fate. Melissa happily suggested meeting at a cozy Italian restaurant on the waterfront. After dinner and a couple of glasses of wine, they were riding to her house, gently kissing in the back seat of the taxi. It was an amazing night. Melissa knew John would be on the road for 3 more weeks, so she had no qualms about inviting the young man to stay with her all that time. On weekends, they went on picnics to the picturesque valley outside the city, walked hand in hand in secluded corners of the city park, went to the movies for romantic films, after which they kissed in the back row of the theater. Melissa was thrilled by the idea of a passionate affair with a young lover, while her husband was away on long hauls. But she especially enjoyed the wild nights spent with the tireless 20-year-old boy in her big marital bed. It was as if she was reliving her youth and carefree dating years again. The deception was unexpectedly revealed in the most shocking way. John was lucky enough to return from his trip a couple of days earlier than he had planned. Remembering that they had a big argument before his departure and hadn't spoken for these 2 weeks, he decided to surprise his wife. Upon arrival, John bought a huge bouquet of red roses and a bottle of champagne, dreaming of a romantic evening with his wife after a long separation. He had no idea this day would end in the worst possible way. As he approached the house, John noticed the bedroom and living room lights were dimmed. This pleased him. It meant Melissa was already home. At the front door, he lingered for a moment, smiling in anticipation of their impending reunion. John quietly opened the door with his key. Beautiful instrumental music was pouring from the speakers in the living room. Leaving the bouquet and champagne in the kitchen, he carefully went upstairs to the bedroom. The door was ajar, and a shocking sight met John's eyes. His beloved wife, whom he was in such a hurry to see after 2 weeks apart, was naked on her knees in front of some young guy, and he in turn held the woman by the hair. Melissa's hands were cuffed behind her back. The guy was the first to notice John standing in the doorway. He recoiled in fright, and Melissa turned around in confusion. She barely had time to notice John's hands clench into fists. John rushed at his wife's lover and, in blind rage, began to violently beat him up. With handcuffs on her wrists, Melissa could do nothing. She couldn't help him in any way. All she could do was scream and cry helplessly, begging her husband to stop the beating. Finally, breathing heavily, John broke away from the bloodied young man. His hands were still clenched as he looked into his wife's eyes. His gaze conveyed contempt and a desire to tear her to pieces. Melissa backed against the wall. "I'll explain everything," she tried to say, but her husband refused to listen. He crossed the distance to her in one stride and punched the wall next to his wife's face with all his might. At that moment, fear gripped her inside, and mentally she was already saying goodbye to life. But John could not afford to lose his composure. He didn't want grave consequences. "Get the hell out of here now," he growled. He pushed the naked lovers out the door despite their protests. John was so angry, he didn't even want to think about what would happen to them outside in that shocking state. He didn't know or want to know what happened to those two after that. The next day, John went to the marriage registration office with a divorce petition, and in the evening he got drunk at a bar until he lost consciousness. Waking up the next morning with a terrible hangover, he realized his life was completely ruined, and he had to start all over again at 45. It was unbearably difficult and painful. He saw Melissa a few times when dissolving the marriage and dividing up property. She begged for forgiveness, cried and begged him to keep the family together for the sake of their shared past and their daughter. But John was adamant. Later, John learned that his ex-wife did move in with that young lover, despite the protests of his mother and general condemnation from friends and acquaintances. Although he told his daughter that he wished them happiness, deep down he still despised them both. He realized their union wouldn't last long. Their relationship was doomed because of the age and life experience difference. After some time, the guy would find a younger girl and his ex-wife would be left all alone. John decided not to look back and move on, starting a new life. He moved to another city, got an interesting new job, and met an understanding woman his own age. Although the scars on his soul remained, life went on. That's the story. Share your thoughts in the comments about this situation and the behavior of the spouses. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and be sure to like this video. It will greatly help promote the channel. Take care and have a wonderful day.